sort of almost a full circle moment, because when I was a 10-year-old kid listening on the transistor radio, never for one moment would I have thought that one day I'd even call a test match in South Africa.
God, that loss still hurts. I still just thinking about it.
Yeah,
it really does. I mean, because here in New Zealand, it was 5 o'clock in the morning.
To me, that was the pivotal moment in the All Blacks' entire World Cup campaign. He wins that line out. The All Blacks go on to win the World Cup. Doesn't win that line out, who knows what might have, or doesn't pinch that line out, who knows what might have happened.
DSPN, the Devlin Sports Podcast Network.
It is the greatest rivalry in international rugby. And of course we say that down here in the Southern Hemisphere. All Blacks versus Springboks. I know that in the Northern Hemisphere, you've got a fair case to argue because you're Six Nations, previous to that the Five Nations, of course. But down here, we've been playing since 1921. And to me, it's Rangers Celtic, it's Red Sox Yankees. It's at that level. And I hope nothing ever happens to dilute the Springboks versus the All Blacks. It's not just about rugby history as well. There's a hell of a lot that has gone on alongside it, the political side of it, Tony, the protests alongside of it. Ultimately, though, when it comes to black versus green on the field, those of us who have grown up watching this, there are games imprinted on our memories, right?
Well, some of us actually started out listening to it.
There
Martin.
you go. Okay, so I saw 1976, black and white TV, getting up, Milo and cheese on toast. You go back a series before that.
Well, I go back to 1970 listening on the radio, but I also go back with the memory of my late father, who used to tell me about his experience, the first time he ever saw the All Blacks. And there was no TV back in those days, and the occasional movie reel at the local town hall where they used to put on a Western movie on Saturday afternoons, and you'd get the Caltex movie reel showing maybe 3 or 4 minutes highlights, and now the All Blacks kick off on a bright sunny day in Christchurch, and the ball goes to, what sort of thing. And that was all he'd ever seen of them. And he went with his parents to Lancaster Park, 1956, the pivotal test of that great series when they just kept putting people in the ground. I don't think they knew how many people were there. And he said that the two things that he remembered about that were, of course, they brought Kevin Skinner back for that third test out of semi-retirement. And the first line out of the game, he said he can remember there was a dust-up and one of the Springbok forwards came sort of reeling away from the line out, holding his face. And the other thing he remembered was that Don Clark kicking, not so much the shots at goal, but when he punted the ball. He didn't think it was possible for a human being to kick a ball so high in the air as Don Clark did. So I kind of grew up with my dad telling me about that. Yeah. And then 1970, when the All Blacks went to South Africa. So to me, it is the greatest rivalry in rugby. I don't think there's any, with all due respect to the likes of England against France,
of course,
the Lions get involved, or the Bledisloe Cup, all of those other rivalries. But to me, it's the greatest. In fact, one of the very greatest rivalries in sport, and quite unique amongst them when you consider all the different components of it. The history of it going back to 1921, it's you can't get around the fact that there were politics involved in it for a long periods of time. This has had the ability both on and off the field to divide a nation and to galvanise a nation, and it has done so on both sides of the argument. And there's very few sports can point to that. Spectacular action, often brutal, always controversial, played out in the most intense of circumstances, red-hot atmosphere. To me, there's nothing like it. And so many games decided on a knife edge, just little moments within the confines of an 80-minute test match. To me, there is nothing quite like it. I guess, as you say, we're biased. Other people might disagree. Yeah. But to me, hard to put up an argument that there's a greater rivalry in rugby. But I also think an argument that it is unique amongst all sporting rivalries and one of the very best in all of sport.
We're going to run through now. Our five, my thing was my 5 best All Black wins. Tony wants to call it his 5 most memorable matches, and mine was my 5 most painful losses, and you, again, have a different title for this. Let's start with our best, though. 1996 Pretoria, I vote that my favourite ever game, because it means as much to me as a Rugby World Cup final win. And I know a lot of people who have been brought up with the Rugby World Cup being the focus of international rugby probably don't get it. This was 30 years ago. but dancing in the streets of Wellington at 5 o'clock in the morning, coming out of the apartment block, and there were just hundreds of people out there, Tony, all for the same reason. We'd got up at 3 o'clock, Sean Fitzpatrick pounding the field after we'd finally won a series in South Africa. You've gone through 70, 76, all of these things, right?
Yep.
And so it was our parents' generation. There were grown men crying, old All Blacks crying because of this. Something had been achieved. That stands at the very top for me still.
That was the final frontier, wasn't it? They'd gone there in 1928 and had shared a series there, gone there in 1949 and been whitewashed 4-0. Went 1960 and was a very tight series, which had gone down to the wire, 2.5, 1.5 in the end because there was a draw. Mm-hmm. Went to the final test with the possibility of sharing the series, didn't happen. And then in 1970, which was the one that I first listened to, when they went there with a team full of great players coming at the end of an era. And remember, at that stage, I was at primary school and I'd started following rugby maybe when I was 5 or 6, whatever. They'd lost a test to South Africa in 1965, the third test in Christchurch. Hadn't lost a match since then.
Right, okay, so yeah. And this was Pine Tree and this was, Winneray and this was...
Yeah, but I'll get back to that later on because that features amongst my Springbok achievements. So to go there in 1996, 20 years after that fateful tour in 1976, and to actually get there, it was a weird one too because they played a test that was separate from the series first because it was part of the Rugby Championship.
I counted as part of the series.
Yeah,
Tony.
And then they went on, well, this was the official way that it was couched, and then they went on to play 3 tests in a separate series. They won the first at sea level. They knew that by the time they got to Ellis Park, the chances of winning, they would be probably exhausted because they'd been playing midweek games as well. Some of the players having to double up a little bit. And they didn't really think that they knew deep down that it would be very, very hard to win at Ellis Park, where they'd lost the World Cup final the year before. So it had to be Loftus. A couple of big moments in the game. Frank Vance, I remember him talking about lying in the bottom of the ruck and peering out as Zinzan Brook lined up a drop kick at goal and at a crucial moment. That was classic Zinny. But we'll always remember that at the end of the game, just the sight of exhausted players. And it was Zinzan Brook who yelled out, "They don't score." They had to defend a drive right on the goal line and they had to stop them. And that the sight of Sean Fitzpatrick thumping his fist on the ground, that's something that anyone who saw it'll stay with them forever.
Okay, then we've got 4 to go. So roll them.
Okay. I'm going to start. I've got Loftus there as well. To me, I've got 2015. These are the All Black ones. I've got 5 notable Springbok wins as well, which I really want to talk about. 2015 Rugby World Cup semi-final. I called that game. I was working with ITV and I was sitting alongside Joel Stransky.
Who dropped the goal in 95, right?
One of the most wonderful people I've ever had the privilege of working with. And it was tricky because we were both sitting there trying desperately to be neutral, but you knew what was going on, under the chest.
Yep.
Came down to one moment to me in the end, and it was a line-out, and it was late in the game. The weather was packing in. It was starting to get wet, and if the Springboks win that line-out on their own throw, it was just to one side of halfway, you got the sense that they would be able to take the ball into All Black territory and probably get a penalty because that's the way things were happening at that World Cup. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure, I can't remember whether Pollard was still on the field or whether Lambie was there. Either way, they had a clutch goal kicker and you thought, win the line out, get into All Black territory, win a penalty, and that could be the game. And Sam Whitelock saw the space in front of Victor Matfield, who had been the nemesis of the All Blacks for such a long period of time, arguably the greatest line-out forward ever. But Sam Whitelock on this one moment got in front of him and stole their ball, and to me, that was the pivotal moment in the All Blacks' entire World Cup campaign. He wins that line-out, the All Blacks go on to win the World Cup. Doesn't win that line-out, who knows what might have, or doesn't pinch that line-out, who knows what might have happened. So it just came down to that one moment.
Okay, DC's drop goal as well to keep us in it at 14 men was absolutely crucial.
True.
All right, number 3 has got to be 56 or 81, surely.
I didn't actually put either of those in because I've sort of tended 56. I've kind of haven't brought it in because it wasn't in my memory. As I say, I talked about that early on, winning the series, and the whole country was turning out. The Springboks, everywhere they went, hundreds and hundreds of people would turn up at the train stations to watch them. 81, played out against a backdrop that hopefully in sport will never be repeated, but there was that incredible test match at Eden Park, and if Nas Botha is one of the most mild-mannered people that I've ever met, but if you ever want to get his cheeks flushing, just talk about that penalty that Clive Norling awarded at the end of the game.
In the 95th minute or whatever it was.
Whatever it was. Yeah. No, the ones I've got in terms of the All Blacks, I've got a test match at Soweto in 2010. It was John Smith's 100th, and that was the one where, with the game in the balance again, Martin Devlin slipped through in the midfield.
The boot came off.
Left a boot behind.
There you go. Okay.
And Israel Dag, perhaps forgetting that they had very shallow in goals, dives and almost put his hand out over the dead ball line as he was going. That was one of a series of fantastic test matches that we saw. Remember 2009, the Springboks won all three. And then from 2010 through to about 2017, 2018, we just had this succession of fantastic test matches that were decided by very narrow margins. And that was kind of the start of that one there. So I've got that. 2012 Forsyth Bar. I remember that because it was the atmosphere under the roof, one of the best I've ever experienced for a New Zealand test. Richie McCaw. That was the night that a couple of the Springboks, and Dean Kraling in particular, went after him, and they kept knocking him down, and he kept getting back up again. Even when they were kicking off, he was going in to field the kickoffs and to charge straight back at them. It was the greatest display of defiance by a player and courage I think I have ever seen. So that's 2012. And then I've got 2017 at Cape Town. I love test matches at Cape Town. It's a brilliant place to go and watch. Sean Fitzpatrick said it. You haven't experienced everything in test rugby unless you've seen an All Black Springbok test at Cape Town. 25-24, the All Blacks won, but Malcolm Marx produced one of the best performances I've ever seen from a hooker in Test rugby. Got a late try which narrowed the score up, but that was a hell of a game as well. And look, there are plenty of other ones as well.
I got the Frank Bunce 97, 2 tries for Buncey when we were way down at Joburg. That one.
Too old, too slow, 2 tries.
That's it.
That was the headline.
2022, Ian Foster's win at Ellis Park, where the CEO was over there ready to sack him. And 2017, isn't this interesting? Before we go on to the 5 most memorable Springbok wins, that doesn't really count for me. Even though we won 57-0, you'd think it'd be like 7-0 Liverpool over Man United. You'd think you'd be singing that from the rafters. It doesn't actually mean that much to me, Tony, that one. I don't know why that is.
That's a weird thing about the Springboks in Auckland, because they haven't played at Eden Park since 2013, which was a very controversial game too, because Bismarck du Plessis was quite unjustly yellow carded.
Second yellow, got a red.
And then came back and got a second yellow and was sent off. And that one I think still rankles with a lot of Springbok fans, and probably with Bismarck as well, because it was a bit of a slur on his record as a great rugby player. But before that, since then, there hasn't been one at Eden Park. 2017, they played at Albany, and that was just one of those nights where absolutely everything went right for the All Blacks and everything went wrong for the Springboks. There was another one like that back in 2002 at Loftus, where the All Blacks ran up a big score as well. Every single ball bounced their way, and they came back and made a real game of it just a few weeks later at Carisbrook, when Richard Bands scored that great try where he swatted off Carlos Spencer about 3. Carlos Spencer kept trying to tackle him. He kept swatting him off. And then 23, that was played at Mount Smart because...
the Women's World Cup football was on,
was on at Eden Park. They couldn't play there. But no, I didn't have Albany in there as well. That was just one of those purple patches. But the test match in South Africa in 2017 certainly had on my list.
All right, here we go then. And you'll see them come up as well. The 5... I call them most painful losses, but you call them the best Bok wins.
Well, these are notable Springbok wins because, in terms of disappointing performances, well, there's 2 ways of looking at these. If what's one team's disappointments and other team's triumph, and vice versa. Sure. So I go back to that test match. The first disappointment I ever felt as a kid in an All Black result was at that test match in 1970, because they'd had this great era. They had a great team of players, but Fred Allen had stepped away from the job 2 years earlier, and you talked to the guys who went on that tour saying if Fred was still around, it might have been a different outcome. But they went to Loftus. They had been steamrolled their way through the provincial games. Colin Meads had been in the best form of his career until he had his arm broken in a match at Springs. And Brian Williams, 19-year-old, just electrifying the rugby world with his performances. And they went to Loftus and got absolutely ambushed. And I think maybe some of the All Blacks felt that they'd fallen a little bit for that. They were being hyped to the max. You know, Darnie Craven saying, oh, we've got no chance against these guys and what have you. And the Springboks fair ambushed them. There was a famous tackle, a guy called Jocky Janssen, who played in this series, had a huge part in the series, and then went back to the farm afterwards and didn't play international rugby again.
Wow.
But he barreled into Wayne Cottrell, who was the All Black first five, and it just shook the whole thing up. Chris Laidlaw, excuse me, they collared him. He went off with concussion. Sid Going came on, sparked a try, but no, the Springboks won that match, and they went on to win the series. And so that was the first time. That remains probably the most disappointed I've ever felt.
Well, yeah.
Because it happened when I was 10 years old.
It's good that these memories fade after 50-something years, right? Okay,
Yeah.
number 2.
Well, sort of almost a full circle moment, because when I was a 10-year-old kid listening on the transistor radio, never for one moment would I have thought that one day I'd even call a test match in South Africa. And it happened 2006. We were over there. I was part of the team. Nisbo was obviously our head caller. I was doing sideline, and we had Murray there, and Nisbo had to come home after the test match at Loftus, and they went to Rustenburg, and that was my first All Black test.
Fantastic.
And so, you know, I never thought that would ever happen. We stayed at Sun City, which was amazing. It was just quite an experience going to this stadium almost in the middle of nowhere. It was a fantastic stadium, calling the test with Murray, and so that was special. The All Blacks lost that one. I think there was Andre Pretorius, there you go, kicked a penalty goal right at the end. The All Blacks have been going along pretty well. They won the first test well, but then that came in. That was a test match that might have saved Jake White. He was under the cosh, Jake. Terrific fellow. And it was a really important win for him because it kept him in the job.
Right, okay.
And able to go on and so...
70, 2006, keep them coming.
2006. Then you can't go past the Rugby World Cup final of 1995. And that one, these aren't necessarily in the order of importance. Mm-hmm. Nothing more important than that win in 1995. And I'm one of those who believed there was something more important than a rugby match going on that day. I know you say that to Sean Fitzpatrick and he'll bite your head off because he's still gutted about the fact that they lost the World Cup final.
Plus, of course, the poisoning that went on.
Well, yeah, no, they were ill. There's no question about that. I don't believe they were deliberately poisoned. Some people do, but there's no question that they'd been sick. But there was still an incredible occasion, and what I do remember about it is I wasn't commentating, I was reporting there for TV3, and Max Seymour, our cameraman, and I had gone out the night before and got caught up with a bunch of Irish supporters who were still there. And so I was feeling a little frail. And when that plane flew over, I thought, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to cope with this. A most amazing atmosphere I've ever been part of.
Wow.
You could feel the atmosphere. It was frenzied. Never forget the sight of people chanting the name of Nelson Mandela when he first appeared in the gantry above the crowd before the game started. The match itself, incredible. The All Blacks just couldn't quite get their game going.
Couldn't.
The one time they got Jonah in space, it got called back for a fairly marginal forward pass, but it was to counter that. Ruben Kruger probably did score a try for the Springboks as well. But in the end, that got ruled out. So it was a tryless match. Ended up with that epic drop goal by Joel Stransky. And I've seen these amazing photographs of the crowd rising as one as the ball sailed between the posts. And then what you saw in the streets after that, I mean, you talked about what happened in 1996. Well, scenes that you thought you would never ever witness in South Africa. So to me, it's been one of the great privileges of my career, of my life, to have been there on that occasion. Such an important moment.
God, that loss still hurts. I still just thinking about it.
Yeah,
it really does. I mean, because here in New Zealand, it was 5 o'clock in the morning.
It's still a team that went on to greatness the next year. Came back, won the series the next year. But that moment belonged to South Africa. Yeah,
I'm still bitter about it. All right, number 4. It's a World Cup final. You're telling me 2023's got to come into this, doesn't it?
Yeah, a game like so many just decided by fine margins. The difference between kicking a penalty goal, not kicking a penalty goal, the difference between a red card and a yellow card, without wanting to rip the scab completely off that one. But those are the things, the factors that went into that in the end. Look, the All Black team had played quite a superb game to beat Ireland when a lot of people thought they were going to go out in the quarter-final. Then went on to beat Argentina, and Argentina, a team that really front at World Cup, so just making it to the final was a good achievement. But of course it's never enough. When you get to the final, you want to win it. But as I say, it was just one of those test matches decided by very, very narrow margins, and in the end it went with the Springboks.
Final one then?
2014 at Ellis Park. Now, this isn't a disappointment. And in fact, none of these really, apart from that first one at Loftus, and maybe a little bit of disappointment around those 2 World Cup finals, losing those. Of course, it's only natural. But this isn't a disappointment. This is, again, just one of those test matches that were played in the period that I was talking about. This is 2014 at Ellis Park. And there'd been so many of those games through that era that just came down to a moment. And this one came down to a penalty goal. The All Blacks were leading 25-24, and it was a situation where I think it was Liam Messam. There was a late challenge, and they put it up on the big screen, and they put it up again on the big screen and again on the big screen, and in the end they acted on it. And I think that was one of those moments that sort of led, okay, we've got to change the way this is done. But that's not a gripe. That's just what happened, because in the end they did get to the right decision. And it was just a clutch penalty goal by Patrick Lambie, who was ice cool, nailed it. But as I say, it was just another great test match that was decided by this one was 2 points. The one I talked about in Cape Town before, that was decided in the All Blacks' favour by 1 point. That was just the way it was through a lot of the games played in that period. So, yeah, those are 5 what I consider just notable Springbok wins that are part of my consciousness. For some people, they would call them disappointments or failures or whatever you like, but that's kind of not how I look at it. To me, it's just all part of the ongoing story of this fantastic rivalry.
Call it then, Tone. Who wins? You're going to be there Saturday night. I'll be there Saturday night as well. In actual fact, I'm taking 2 South African friends with me. One who lives in Lower Hutt, who's Afrikaans, and his dad is flying in from the High Veld for this match. And so they're coming around for the afternoon. I said, I'll take you to the game. Come with me. Okay, so I'm going. I thought the biggest All Black game that I've been to since the World Cup final, I'm going to take a couple of South Africans. Why the hell not? That's what international rugby is about to me.
Yep.
I can walk in there with a couple of these guys wearing Bok jerseys and actually see you after the game, fellas.
Yeah, and that's the thing I was talking about. You think about the factors, the components that go into this rivalry, and the one thing that I didn't mention back then was that for all of the controversy, the at times brutality, the spectacular rugby, the dramas on and off the field, through all of that, the overriding component, if you like, is this feeling of respect.
Totally, mate.
And it's respect between the players.
Yep.
I think there's a lot of respect between the fans as well.
I agree. I agree.
Disregard what goes on deep down in the sewers of social media, because that happens about everything.
Yep.
But between the players, between the fans of both nations, certainly between the broadcasters, I mean, we're great mates with each other, and we go to each other's house or go out to whatever, things like that. The respect, I think, that kind of governs this relation, or was the undercurrent of this whole thing. That's another thing that just makes it so unique.
Who wins?
Oh, I thought I'd managed to sidetrack that.
I was going to let you off the hook.
Because if I say the All Blacks, then in 5 minutes I think it might be the Springboks. If I say the Springboks, I'll change my.
I reckon it's that close, Tom.
Yeah, it's that close. I can't pick it. Can't pick it.
DSPN.